Hey everyone, I had a request on YouTube to share what I'm planting every month. So since we are in full swing with switching out the cool season and the warm season garden, I thought that I would do that and show you everything that I have planted this week. And so maybe I'll do a little bit of a series with what I'm planting this week. If that would be helpful, please let me know below. This is going to be a much shorter video just so that you can see what I'm up to and so that it can give you an idea of what you need to be up to stay on time in your garden too. All right, first up are these eggplants. So I planted these over the weekend and they are shredded, I see now, as I'm checking on them this morning, and they weren't yesterday as far as yesterday afternoon goes. So when I looked at them this morning, I saw that the center is nibbled out of them and the leaves are just shredded, and these were perfect yesterday. So I am going to take these little baskets right here, which is exactly for this purpose, and I'm going to put them over this because I do not want any more bird damage, and that is what this is. This is bird damage. So I've got, I think, 4 or 5 of these, and I use them all the time. I got them from Gardener's Supply. I've shared that before. A lot of these barriers that I use are from them, and they are just really durable, heavy chicken wire. They're kind of pricey, but you can use them for years to come, so they're kind of an investment. This is what it looks like now. So I had 4 of these dome type cloches, but I had to use another one that's a little bit longer and just put the 2 ends on there and put them together. So I think that'll work. Once these eggplants get bigger, the birds will leave them alone. In this bed, I have some tomato seedlings planted, which the birds do not like because they taste bad. And in this bed, I've planted some more tomato seedlings as well. So today I'm going to be planting some radish seedlings around there because I think that the weather will cooperate with me. It's supposed to cool down just a little bit before it gets too hot for radish seedlings, and I can get a couple batches out of here. I think it takes about 3 weeks from seed to harvest for them, and I can get a couple of harvests out of here right from under the tomato plants before the tomatoes get too big and start hogging this space. In this eggplant bed, I also put a few cucumber seeds around. I did this last year just as a ground cover, so I was able to grow 2 different crops in the same bed. I have the cucumbers that will vine around and shade the soil and cool it and keep it a little moist, and then I have the eggplants up above, and it seemed to be a really good combination. I had great luck with that. In this bed, I had some cabbages, and I've got some Brussels sprouts that are pretty much done, but this is the clover that I planted as a ground cover, and that is probably, well, this is a great testament. This is a cabbage, which is about 12 to 14 inches tall, and the clover is just about the same height. So I think that's about as tall as it's going to get. So this is something that I am trying out as a ground cover. Yesterday, I ripped out all of the brassicas that were in here, except for this one. That's a little peace offering for the bees. But I had some garbanzo beans that are starting to dry out. They've got quite a few beans on them, so I just planted them to refresh my seed supply, honestly, and to see how I liked planting them in between the cauliflower and broccoli. It worked out pretty well, I think, but I ripped out all the brassicas, added some compost, and then I planted the last bit of my Hopi blue corn in here because I want to refresh the seed supply on that too, and hopefully I will get enough to be able to plant more next year. In these little squares, this one and also that one over there that's covered, I have my sweet potato slips that I started in the house. I will link that below if you're interested in seeing that short. I talked all about how I grow my own sweet potato slips, that I have some that are good for our environment because they've been grown here year after year, and they're free to start and ready when I need them. I covered them up. You can see them down in here. Look how adorable they look. I covered them up because they need to harden off. They've been in the house on my windowsill, and as soon as I brought them outside, they were drooping already. So I'm just gonna leave them covered just for a week or so until they can, toughen up and get used to the intense sun out here, and then I will take this cover off. I'll be clearing this bed with clover and cabbages out probably next week when I get a little time. The leeks are almost done, And this bed of cabbages is nearing done. I've got several Savoy cabbages. Look what a perfect little cabbage baby that is. I have several little Savoy cabbages that are about ready to pick. My purple ones did not do very well this year. I think it was just our crazy temperatures. They just did not form the head. So next year, I think I'm just gonna go with the Savoy and maybe the Copenhagen because those did really well. More broccoli that I'll be clearing out probably in the next couple of days. And this bed was the one that I planted to show all of the different things that you could grow in just one 4x4 square. So that is starting to bolt now. I've got the arugula that the bees are enjoying, as well as some kale that is starting to bolt. And I've got cilantro starting to bolt. I'm seeing a theme here. I've got my Swiss chard, and I've been harvesting quite a few carrots in here. I think probably I'll be able to harvest a few beets as well. But let me show you these little carrots. These are the fingerling carrots, so they're supposed to be small. Let's see if I can find a good one. But I like these small varieties for these small beds. Look how cute that is. You slice that in half and roast it or put it on a salad, and that would be not only beautiful, but also very tasty. These are really sweet. So I've got quite a few more of those to do. Let's see if I've got any of these beets. Let me look here. They seem pretty small, but they've been kind of chilling out here for a couple months. So these are a small variety anyway. These are the Red Robin beets. Look how cute that is. I'll probably pull those and clean them and just roast them whole. And those will also be just lovely on our salads. I just love being able to harvest all these fresh things. But I see some of my spinach is starting to form a flower there too, so it's bolting. So I had a ton of stuff in here, but I think this is going to be ready to be harvested. I'll probably harvest all this kale and everything all in one fell swoop, and then have some veggies for our lunches this week, and then I'll be able to open up this bed to plant other things. So that's what I have going on in my square beds. So let's move over to the long, narrow beds that I have, and then we can talk about what I have been planting in those this week. All right, in this first long bed, I've got the beet seedlings growing that I planted a little while ago. I have my tomato transplants that I set out in the last few weeks, both under wall of water, and then some new plants that I added. And I also added some squash seeds and some melon seeds. It is closest to my tiny, tiny little fig seedlings. And so what I have right now are the peas that are still finishing up. I've got some last little cabbages and kale. I've got some chamomile growing right now, and I have some calendula, and I've just added the sunflowers. I planted those about 2 weeks ago because I want those to grow right along with the tomato plants so that they can provide shade. My tomato plants are still itty bitty right now, and that is okay because remember, I'm just a bit south of Tucson, and we actually had our last frost just about 2 weeks ago. The peas that I have growing on this cattle panel trellis that are in between this row of tomatoes and then the row of tomatoes on the other side of it, those are doing really well. They're just starting to bloom here, which is so cute. Look at those sweet little blooms. All along the rest of this, about 3 feet apart, I planted my squash seeds. I planted Magdalena Big Cheese and the Rancho Marquez, I think is how you say it. I will put the names of those on the screen as always. I'm hoping that I can kind of isolate the squash this year. The vines took over the garden last year and they just went crazy. So I'm hoping they can just vine out here, you know, all around these tiny little fig seedlings that have not leafed out yet, and that they can just have a field day out here and not strangle the rest of my garden. And then the melons will be here, so I'm hoping that they can just kind of grow out in this area. I planted some Kiribasho melons. I will put the name of that on the screen. That's a Tohono O'odham variety. And then all along here, there are just these little beet seedlings, and there are tomato seedlings in here, and a few little onions, and the peas, of course. As I've been walking around, you probably noticed the shed looks a little different, and also that there is a huge pile of stuff right here. So no, I am not a hoarder. I am getting my shed fixed. So I mentioned in a previous video that we were going to be doing some repairs on the shed, and we started that this weekend. So it was mostly structurally sound. There were a few little things that needed to be changed, but for the most part it was like these fascia boards that were rotting because of improper drainage. So we've got a little drainage pipe that comes down from the roof right there, and it was not routed properly, so the moisture was just sitting up there, and it was causing a lot of the wood material to rot. So my husband is replacing a lot of this stuff. We've got some primer up. We are replacing the window. I am really excited about this. Probably 3 or 4 years ago, we picked up this brand new window at a salvage yard in Tucson, and we thought about using it just for this purpose. And we got it super cheap, and we've just hung on to it and tried to keep it safe so that we could replace the old aluminum window that really didn't open very well in this shed. So we are going to finally be using it. And the other side of it, it's very cute. It's red, which I think is adorable. But anyway, we are going to be priming and painting the shed, replacing the window, and also the door. Let me show you. So the door that we had here had obvious termite damage from in the past. It's not active, so the previous homeowner must have had the termites treated, but the inside of the door was pretty much gone. So we are replacing it with one of these. We'll be painting it to match the paint color on the shed. And let me show you the rest of it because I'm really excited about this next part. So that is the door, and the reason we have that huge pile of stuff out in the yard next to the garden is because I had to clear all of my tools and my supplies and things out from the shed. We're going to be replacing this pegboard and putting up hooks so that I can actually hang up my hand tools, and we've already got this. This will probably stay where it's at. The window will go there, but we're going to be replacing this light for something that puts out a lot more light. This really just creates a lot of shadows and doesn't really put out a ton of light. So we'll be doing that. Of course, I need to organize here. But the thing I'm really excited about is this skylight that is almost installed, and that is going to let in so much light in here. So instead of being like a dark little cave, it'll actually be a nice place to work. So I'm hoping that I can organize my things between the pegboard and the shelves and these hooks so that I have some open space in here, maybe to put in a little potting table so that I can do work and look out the window and admire my little garden. So that'll be nice. But yeah, that is going to be a job to have to tackle. In this second long bed, I've got all of my onions growing, but I did end up sneaking in a few watermelons. So I'm hoping that the watermelons will start growing and that they will just kind of wind their way through those onions as I'm harvesting the onions. And then eventually I will just do a swap out and I will have watermelon vines in there and no more onions. Also in this row, next week, I'm going to be planting a ton of my chili and pepper seeds. So now is the time for chilies and peppers. We are out of the danger of frost. I think that they take quite a long time to mature. They really like the heat for sure. So I'm thinking after we pass that day next week around Tucson where we're having, I think it's going to be in the 70s. I think after that the heat is going to start ramping up, and that is exactly what those peppers want. So I'm going to be putting those in the ground next week. Otherwise, I have beet seedlings in here. I have onions finishing up. I've got a little bit of my lettuce left that is starting to get a little bitter, but I am hoping that it will be okay. I have some Swiss chard that I moved from one of my other areas to here because it was in my way for planting the next thing, and I can't stand to just pull up a plant that is in its prime. So I very carefully dug around the roots of those and I moved them over here, and they did wilt the first couple of days, but I gave them a good drink of water. I covered them with a bit of shade cloth, and they have made a full recovery, and they are starting to look really beautiful again. You would not know that the Swiss chard was moved from across the garden. Just look how pretty that is, and its neighbor too. They did wilt really badly. You can actually see one of the leaves that just gave it up, but the plant rebounded and there is a ton of new growth in here. And Swiss chard does surprisingly well in the heat for a green, so I'm happy to have that. All right, let's talk about this row behind me. This one is one of my favorites right now just because I have been pulling so many carrots out of the ground. The carrots that I planted back in November are all pretty much ready to go, so I've been working on pulling those and eating them a little bit at a time. I've got some beet seedlings in here, and my potatoes are finishing up. Now these potatoes are the ones that were frozen in the last frost event where I was a negligent potato mother and I did not cover them up. So they are actually coming back. They're starting to leaf out at the base, and so I think that they are going to make a full recovery, which is a big relief because I was really worried that maybe I had messed things up. A few days ago I planted some green bean seeds in this row. This is a 32-foot row, so I think it will be plenty. But as you can see, I have left the row cover or the hoops in place because I'm going to be putting a row cover back over this, not for sun or frost protection right now, but actually for bird protection, because birds absolutely love green bean sprouts when they first start emerging. And who doesn't love those? I love those too, and some of the Asian dishes that I cook, so you can't blame them for that. But I am going to try to block them from stealing my green bean seedlings. Oh, look what I just saw. It's my first little bean sprout. So that is a clue to me that this row definitely is going to need to have a cover today, because in the next day or so, those are going to be emerging and I will not be able to keep the birds away. This little triangle bed here is full of fava beans. It's so funny, there's just this one little patch that's super lush and much bigger than the rest. This garlic bed, along with the fava beans, these were the last two beds we added last spring, and the soil is the least built up and the least enriched out of all of my beds. And these fava beans are really showing signs of that. They are yellow. They probably need a little more of an amendment going on, but these are really here to try to help build the soil. They're going to be fixing nitrogen, giving me a little bit of food, and then I'm just going to leave the roots in place and chop and drop the rest of the tops once they're finished, just to add organic matter and nitrogen to the soil. My plan for this bed next week is to plant zucchini and okra in here together. So the okra will grow tall and it will provide a little bit of dappled shade to the zucchini, which the zucchini doesn't necessarily need, but it does appreciate a little bit. I've had really good luck with that in the past, with combining either sunflowers or okra or amaranth with my zucchini, because it tends to use a little bit less water that way. So that is what I'm going to be planting in this bed. I have so many calendula that are just erupting in bloom now. A couple weeks ago when they first started to bloom, I left the blooms be because I wanted to share with the bees, because there really wasn't a whole lot blooming in the garden besides some of the brassicas that I have mentioned before had bolted and gone to flower. So many bees and beneficial insects love calendula bloom, so I definitely wanted to just leave those be at first to welcome them in. And so now there are lots of other things blooming. I have nasturtiums and I have peas and I have lots of our fruit trees, and the fleabane is actually starting to come out. So they've got quite a few other choices. So I am going to start harvesting those calendula flowers because I like to dry them in my dehydrator, infuse them with either jojoba oil or sweet almond oil, and then I will use it to make skin products for myself. So now that there are so many blooming, and now that there are other things blooming as well, it is my turn to start sharing with the bees and harvesting some of those blooms. It's the first little carpenter bee I see. Look at him. I just love those. I just released a really short video on nectar robbing, and I was talking about how carpenter bees do that. And so if you want to check that out, I will link that below. It's just a very short, I think it's under a minute video, so it's pretty interesting. But look at that little guy. How sweet. It won't be long before the scabiosa that I planted months ago along this one side of the garlic bed, it won't be long before it really starts going. It'll be blooming soon. And on this side, this is more of the calendula that I planted, and this was just from extra seed that I had saved last year. So this cost me nothing but time, but I'm hoping to really be able to harvest a lot of the blooms, and it continues on this side too, which is very exciting. I was working hard last weekend. This is all of my trellising and my cages and all of my things that I just kind of store back here. I think just like a kitchen, every garden needs a little junk drawer, a junk corner. And this is definitely my junk corner, but I was raking and trying to get all of this stuff up because I am shredding it up so that I can have my own mulch. But right now it is definitely a disaster. But there stands Shreddy Krueger helping me out so that I can get some nice mulch for my garden. It seems that by the end of every video I end up in this spot next to my peas, but that is because it's the shadiest spot this time of day in the garden and it is getting pretty hot. I just wanted to summarize exactly what I have been planting this week in the garden, so in case you want to go out and plant those things in your garden, you can stay right on schedule because timing is everything here in southern Arizona for sure. All right, so here is the rundown. This week I planted seedlings for tomatoes, tomatillos, and eggplants. I have planted seeds for sunflowers, beans, melons, both watermelon and cantaloupe, as well as squash. So I will be back next week to tell you exactly what I'm planting in my garden and where, and hopefully that will help you figure out what you need to plant in yours. I'm Kara from So Arizona. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Until next time, happy gardening.